for a year now or longer that this should be changed, and today we actually wanted to present something that's actually usable, not demoware, but actually something you can start using today to make this pain a little more bearable. So just describing again what a process is currently. So you need the process itself, the content model, and the form configuration. So it's a bunch of XML files which have interlinking references. So yeah, it's really easy to make a typo and then just screw up the whole thing. So we try to make this more simple and have one editor that creates all of these artifacts. So for example, in a simple process with 3 human steps, you would have a lot of content types, which is really spaghetti code. So it's very powerful, but limiting on the other hand, because it's really complex. So a normal or a person who just wants to create a simple workflow has to be an expert in order to get started. So that's something we try to change. So the solution we came up with, we call it Project Kickstart. So it's just an internal name or just a code, like a code name. So it's not an actual product part of the roadmap. So it will be later on. I'll talk about that later on. So we created Project Kickstart, sorry, to make it easy to create processes for Alfresco specifically. So the stuff that comes out of this editor is still the same as it used to be. So it's still a process, it's still a form config, and it's still a content model. So if you want to customize it or add in the things you used to do, you still can do it. You can just take the artifacts and start editing them. But at least you have a good base to start from, and most of the stuff will be covered by that editor. So I think that's the main presentation. The rest of the presentation will be a demo. So we've taken a classic example like a hiring process. So it's a cliche, but every company needs to hire people, and we'll just start from scratch, design the process, run it in Alfresco, and make some changes as we go, demonstrating the power of the tool we created. So the actual product is created as an Eclipse plugin. So this is directed at technical people, although it's not, the editor itself is easy to use, at least that's what we think. So that's, the reason was because we had a good, Eclipse is a good platform to develop stuff in, like create editors, and handle properties and things. So it's really a good basis and a clean like UI or at least shell that we can start from. So we did it internally in our team, so we didn't need UI resources, we didn't need external people, we just built it and made it as good as we could. So we'll just start off by creating a project. Can be any project. And create a Kickstart diagram. We'll call it hire or something. So you get a canvas where you can draw on steps. So opposed to the actual BPM editor, these steps are more simple. So you don't have to connect the arrows. It's just a sequential flow of what your process will look like. So in the properties view, we can give the workflow a name, so we'll call it recruitment process, and give it an ID. So then we can start by adding a start form. Of course, when someone starts the workflow, we want to gather some information for that workflow. So we create a start form. We call it start. Here you can see the form editor. So make it a bit bigger. There's a number of controls you can start using. So like you have the basic text input, number input, text areas, dates, booleans, and lists. Then there's also references, so you can say, I want the user to select a person or multiple people. I want to select a group, or I want to have content selected on the form. And also some of the stuff that's already in Alfresco, like the due date, the priority, the description, comments. So all these things can just be used without custom coding. And last but not least, you have a group, if you want to group logical fields together to make it more clear to the user. So we'll just start with the normal stuff you have on a workflow, a due date and a priority. And since we're doing a higher process, we want to determine when it starts what type of job it is. So call it position type and say, well, it's either in sales, marketing, engineering, or support, whatever. Then we want to gather some information about the person who's applying for the job, so we create a new group, employee, make it 2 columns, and we'll just interested in the person's name and the email address. We also want to upload the resume and the picture. We'll add the default package items to it. We may want to add a description as well to the workflow. And then last but not least, we want our process or our employee to be reviewed. So we'll determine when the process starts who in the company will review the resume, and then they can either approve or reject if they agree with hiring the person. So we'll add some input for that. So we say, well, I want to select some people, multiple people, and it's required. So is the name and the email. And we also want to add how many people should approve in order for the person to be approved in general. So we say also mandatory. So now we created our start form. So this is actually drag and drop editor. You can drag around the components, add or remove as you wish. So it's not that it's written once and then fixed. Okay, so then we'll add additional steps to our process because now only a start form is a bit ridiculous. So we have a few steps here that we can use. So a human step is just a plain task, just assigned to one person, to many people, assigned to a group. So there's stuff you can do there. Delay the process for a while. If you say, well, the process is actually not useful now, so in 2 weeks, I want to wait 2 weeks and then a task should appear, for example. We can send an email, do parallel stuff, do choices, or a review and approve, which is actually a built-in review and approve contained in one element. So we'll do that. So there's a couple of things we should fill in with a review, of course. So it should have a form. In that form, we'll just show the person his name and then his the resume. So we'll add a reference. The name, the email, and then add the resume and the package items. The next thing we should do is actually say who will review it. So we say, well, multiple users are going to review it, and the assignees for these tasks will be based on something we selected in the start form. So in this case, it's the select people field. And the approval count is also something we selected, which is this one. So you can see you can only select the properties that are of type number. So it has some built-in conventions, so you can't mess up the review step. So next thing we should do is decide what's going to happen when the review is rejected. So in this case, we'll end the process when it's rejected, and we'll send a mail to the person that he's not suitable for the job. We'll use, for the to field, we'll use a property as well, which we fill in the start form. We say, well, we're going to send it to the email the person has filled in when starting the workflow, and then the subject, sorry. No. I'm going to use a pre-built piece so that I don't have to type a lot of text. So you can see you can use like expressions in there which reference a field somewhere in the process. So not necessarily in the start form, this could be in a previous task, for example. So the rejection mail is finished. Now, in case the person is approved, we'll send a confirmation mail. The same. Also send it to the person involved. The text. And finally, we have someone from the HR department to sort out the paperwork and contact the employee to do the further onboarding in the company. So I add a human step, which should be performed by a human, and we'll assign it to someone in the HR group. So Alfresco groups names are actually prefixed with group underscore. You just don't see it. Just something to remember. So someone in the HR group can claim this task and finish it, and we'll just add a simple form to it to show the person in HR who to contact. So we'll just copy our review form, for example. Call it paperwork. We'll remove the resume field. All right. So this actually is our first version of the process. So we just review, some people review the employee's resume. Once it's approved, we send a confirmation email and sort out the paperwork. If not, we just reject and the process is finished. So I'm not sure if anyone already did some development of processes in Alfresco, but if you want to make this using the BPM editor and then make the form files, this takes at least an hour if you're experienced in it. If you've never done it, you should take a day or something to get into it. So we're ready to run the process, so we'll export it. So there's 3 ways we can just export it to the target folder. We'll just do that. And it will create for us all artifacts you would normally write yourself. So we have the process file. I can open it with the editor. So you can see it's quite, even though we have only 3 steps, it's quite complex already. So this is the process. Also, we have the content model generated. You can see here, for example, our position types. And all tasks have their own content model here with the properties. And last but not least, there's also a form configuration created. No, it's here, which is even longer. So it also includes a start form. So these artifacts you can just take, deploy in Alfresco at the right location. There's also some convenience context files with it, so it automatically bootstraps it. But yeah, you could alter these versions, but to make it even better, we try to make it as simple as possible. So we actually made it possible to deploy it through CMIS, sorry. So there's a big disclaimer text in there, so there's nothing wrong with deploying workflows through CMIS, but we added some additional share reloading web script, so you can, later on I'll show you where you can get it. So this allows you to, without restarting share, actually get the new form configs immediately. So this is not a must, so you can just disable it, and then you have to restart share. So it only takes a couple of seconds, but it's better than restarting the repository. So we'll just turn it on, and we'll finish. You see him doing all the stuff. So now, if all went well, the process is now deployed in our Alfresco. And we're logging as the manager of the engineering department, which wants to do a new hire. So he gets an email from someone who wants to join the company, and he'll start off the process. So I'll first upload the resume. So both the picture and the resume. For these items, we'll start a workflow. We'll select our recruitment process, which we just created. So the form looks like the form we made in our editor. Allows you to select the due date, hi, and then the type, position, so it's engineering. Name is Mark Zuckerberg. So we see the resume and picture attached. Here we can select the people to review. For this position, we want John Newton to review, and one of our rockstar engineers, Joram, and me. So now we say, well, if 2 out of 3 approve, it's okay for Brian as a manager. So it just puts in 2. So it's also a number field, which is forced by the content model we generated. So we start a workflow. Now it appears in the workflow we started. Just check out the history. So if you look at the diagram, it's actually waiting in the review step. And indeed, everything we filled in is here. So the employee name and email, the resume, the people who's gonna review, and we see three tasks available. So we'll just log in as Joram. You see he has a new task assigned to him. Gets an overview of who the person is who wants to actually apply for the job, and we can approve or reject. I forgot to add a comment field. That's also possible to add a field which you can comment on, and then it's displayed in the workflow history. Login as John also. So now, if he approves, then 2 people will have approved, and then actually the review step is over, because if 2 out of 3 people approved, then it moves on, regardless of what the third person does. This is just the way we implemented it. If you want it differently, you can just alter the generated process, but I think it's the most sensible way of implementing this. So we also approve, and then what should happen is we should get a mail.
Awesome. I'm in mail.
So we got a mail to Mark. So there's an email address we filled in with the content, and all the placeholders are replaced by the things we filled in. So this is Alfresco mailing put in action, but then with a clean editor in front of it. So if we look at the process, there also should be a pull task for someone in HR to sort out the paperwork. So this is the case. If we go back as a manager, he should see the full history of the workflow and where it's at right now. So again, we can look at the diagram, and it's actually here. And here's the history that was taken. So this shows a basic idea of how this process can be designed without actually diving in XML or actually knowing how a review and approve should be modeled in BPM. So, of course, processes evolve, so I'm just going to modify the process a little bit to see it's just as easy as just dragging additional stuff in. And at the same time, also some more constructs which we have in the editor. So let's say Mark Zuckerberg seemed a good choice in the beginning, but actually wasn't that a nice person. So the manager thinks we'll have to do an interview to actually meet the person which we're hiring. So we'll just add a human step in between, which allows you to schedule an interview. We'll create a form again based on the previous one. Schedule, go to it. So this can stay, and then the resume is not really important. What's important is that we can schedule a date for the interview. So we'll add a date field to our form. So we can allow to select a time or not, but in this case it's good to select a time for the interview, and we're going to output the property to the workflow. So once this task is completed, the value which we filled in will be available for all next steps. So by default in Alfresco, everything you fill in a form on a task is kept there. So this way you can just simply say, well, this is important for the process, I want to export it. And we can also add a comment field if needed. So once we have our interview scheduled, we want to wait for that day and afterwards present the task to the manager saying, well, the interview is done, what did you think of the candidate? So we're going to delay the process for a while. So wait for interview. So we could either say, well, wait for 5 hours and 10 minutes or wait for a month, but you could also specify a fixed date. So you can say, we're going to wait for this specific field. So the person chooses what date, and then the process will wait until that date. After that's completed, there will be a final decision, of course, based on the interview and based on the review above. So again, a human step, final decision. It's assigned to the workflow initiator, so the manager, which is good. Again, add a form. We're going to create a real simple one with only the relevant information, which is final or something. So we want to add a thing or two to capture how the interview went. So we can add, for example, what was the first impression? We could say and another one saying social skills. Like that, and then of course the final decision. Which I'm gonna do based on a drop-down list saying hire or reject. We could add multiple choices if you have like a maybe step, or say, well, we're gonna do an additional interview, so you could add additional choices in here. So this is our form, just the final decision can be done here. So of course, if you look at our workflow, it's still going straight down. So after the final decision, we need to look at the decision to make a choice, because now it's automatically confirmed. So we'll add a choice step, which does exactly what it's named. It chooses one of the paths. So in case he's hired, we'll execute those two things. So send a confirmation email and again sort out the paperwork. So we should now say when is this path taken. So we can say, well, in case the final decision field equals or whatever hire, then he's hired. In case he's not hired, we want to just send another rejection mail. This time another one rejected. Also make it based on the decision. So this could be done using, for example, a number field and then check if it's greater than 10. So for an expense process, it's interesting to fork in case it's above 10,000 euros, go to this manager, otherwise go there. So that's all stuff you can do, or actually compare two properties. So two values filled in different forms can be also compared. So, but now we just compare with literal values. In the future, it should be actually available to, instead of typing reject, referencing a value in a list in another form. So you can't make a typo, because if you type it wrong, yeah, the workflow would not behave the way you would expect it. But this is an initial version, so there's a lot of improvements that could be done. So, okay, our rejection path is set up. If the decision is reject, this will be taken. Now only just configure our email just for we'll just fill something in because it's not really relevant if you haven't came here to see me typing. So our process is altered and done, I think. So we have an interview scheduling, waiting, actually gathering feedback, and then based on that feedback and the decision, we do two separate things. So as I mentioned before, you could easily add a third path to this. But in our case, it's actually a review and approve, but we made it ourselves. So it's more review and approve is just a review or approve, while the choice step can be multiple choices. Right? Just gonna double check our forms that the decision should be output to the workflow, otherwise we'll get an error because the decision is not available in the next step. So this is also something that the tool should inform you about when exporting, which is not the case right now. You get a bit of an ugly error, but yeah, it's something you should be careful about. All right, so we'll deploy it again. All right. Start a workflow. No, gotta have some documents first, of course. I'll just reuse the same for ease. Start a workflow again. Our recruitment process is here. We want a new member for the activity team. And then we have a candidate called Mark. The same thing. So to make the demo quicker, we just have one assignee, and the minimum approval count is 1. So if he approves, it's fine. Start off the workflow. So So you will immediately see that this time the workflow which is created is much more complex, so it doesn't even fit on one screen. So yeah, it's a chain of all the steps we did, all laid out the way it should. Right, so as a workflow initiator, you can always complete tasks in the workflow, even though you're not the assignee. So we're just going to do this to prevent me from logging in and logging out again. So we see here a review, a task assigned to Yoram, and we'll just say Yoram has approved. Next step available is actually to Brian to schedule the interview, which we'll do now. So interview will be in our London office. And we'll say, well, we'll do it today. I'm just gonna put in 1 minute so we don't have to wait for weeks. So now the task is done. We can see here it's waiting for the interview. That does mean that there are no active tasks for this workflow, so it's just sitting there in the background doing nothing and not bothering anyone with tasks which are not yet relevant. So the interview feedback step is only relevant if the interview has taken place. So that's why this is introduced. We also see that time has passed now, so if you refresh and look at it again, we see that the waiting is over and we passed on to the final decision. Then Brian says, well, average, good enough. And he says higher, so a higher path will be taken. We'll get a confirmation email, and someone should sort out the paperwork. So
Awesome. Email.
So yeah, this just shows how easy it is to just extend an existing process and get going quickly. One more thing I wanted to show you is that we can actually delete this process here and use the CMIS navigator to look up processes that some other people created. So you can share a process with your colleagues, alter it, and then download it back again in your Eclipse. So this is a CMIS browser connected to my local Alfresco, and I have a previous process set up. I think in here, an HR process. We can say download. It will ask for a destination. And here's a process which I prepared a while back. We can now modify it again and request for a sync. And then a new version of that file will be created on the repository. So that's a feature that's added to make it easy to share the processes you created and not be forced to use Git or a Subversion or any other tool. Just leverage your existing Alfresco for this. So the actual settings for your Alfresco can be altered as well. So if you want to run on somewhere a staging machine, you can just point your Eclipse to that and use that for reference. And I'll finish up with the last bit of presentation after the long demo. So just going over what the process looked like. To phase 2, we added an interview scheduling, and then in the process I downloaded, there was an additional background check, but the time ran out, so I decided not to show it. Took a bit longer than expected. So where can you get this? This is actually not demoware. I said before, you can use this. You can start using it today. There's an update site in that URL. You can just drop in any, or any at least starting from Juno Eclipse, but that's I think the standard now. Drop it in and you can start modeling your workflows. You don't have to use CMIS, you can just export it to the artifacts and copy those if you don't want to have those, the dynamic thing. But it's easy for development, so I wouldn't recommend using this approach on production, but for development and rapid iteration, within a few minutes you're up and running. So the final version, which will be, I think, when 5.15 will be released, I think in 2 months, will support Juno and Kepler with an update of the Graffiti library. It's compatible with Alfresco 4.0 and upwards, so there's no custom things deployed. This is just generating forms, models, and processes, which are run Activiti. So starting from 4.0, Activiti was shipped in enterprise. Hot deployment, again, it's a hack, so don't use it in production. It's just a way to get share reloaded even quicker. You can find it on my GitHub. It's just a README there. Just drop in the files, and you're ready to go. Already told about the collaboration, so you never make processes in isolation. You share them. So what's the future of Kickstart? So we're actually developing or continuing to develop the Eclipse plugin, and we'll welcome to get feedback from you guys. So yeah, so now people will start using it, and probably some stuff will come out, but that's a good thing. That's open source, so if you want to use it, just use it. I can guarantee that the processes run out that come out right now is actually really not just hacked together, the really stuff you can use. So you can trust me on that one. So the actual idea is to make it available for non-technical users, and that's been part of an ongoing effort, which not only involves us as technical people, but also UX, UI, and all kinds of other departments. So this will be run in the browser, and it will be targeted to even less technical people, to just from within your browser do the same as I did, but even more non-technical. Some initial screenshot of this. This is not final, it's mock-ups. So the same dragging in steps, selecting people in Alfresco, so it's all, adding forms. And then, of course, saving and activating. There will be also a better fine-grained control of who can start the workflows, so you can actually say, well, I want to test it first, and then if it's good, I'll share it with my colleagues. If they think it's a good process, maybe I can share it with my boss, and he can say, oh, good job in creating that. So, conclusion, you can start using today. The presentation is online, you can get the URLs from there. It simplifies it and speeds up development, but doesn't restrict you to do custom stuff. You can still use those artifacts and add additional scripts. And spread the love, please. All right, any more questions? I'm not sure if we have some time, 3 minutes. Yes?
Okay, I have a question. Is there a plan to integrate it into Workdesk?
That's a good question. So the thing we have now is a really technical, not technical, but less usable than one thing that should run in the web. But it's really preparing for the web version. So all the generation of the artifacts, all the heavy lifting, we already have. So this is a test bed for this. But where this will live eventually, that is up to Mark. Oh yeah, Mark Dibberson is the owner of the project. It's up to him where it will live. But it makes sense. It makes sense.
We
but
have
that's
to
not,
discuss.
I'm just an engineer, so.
So on the UI piece, the forms that you're building, what technology are they rendered in, or you're generating something? Is it JavaScript, or what is that? You
mean the final forms?
The final UI,
yeah. So that's actually using the existing Alfresco share config. So
it's actually Surf and.
That's Surf. Okay. Yeah, that's the way metadata forms are rendered as well, I think. So
okay.
It's
just different. One more. On the drop downs, you showed us how to do a fixed list. Is there a way to do a dynamic list?
Not by this editor. Okay. Yeah. You can do that in custom coding, but not with this editor. That's not yet planned.
I have two questions about the restarting. Do you change the content model of Alfresco, so it would require a repo restart? Am I right? Or
yes. No. We deploy the model and the process in the data dictionary, and since they're a special type, they're picked up, and the dictionary reboots or dictionary adds it. So there's a disclaimer with it. So if you redeploy the same model, there's limitations. You can't remove properties. So
you do a hot content model deployment.
Yeah.
And another thing is, wait, let me forget about it.
Just a note on that. So that does the development thing do. So if you want to use a process without that, it's just fine. So you're not forced to do a dynamic model deployment.
Do you think it's possible to have the same plugin to create custom models in future?
That's what Mike Farman asked me, and that will be probably the next step, because we already generate models for tasks, so we could easily generate it loosely as an aspect or as a type. So yeah, that's really on the radar. Yeah.
Hi. I suppose if you want to create custom task listeners and execution listeners, how does that fit in here? Does it happen kind of after you generate the process, then you hook them in? And if that's the case, what happens then if you go through this process to update the workflow again? Does it?
Yeah. So if you want to add custom logic, so like task listeners or Java service calls to your SAP or whatever, you have to edit the generated artifacts, and there's no way back. So once the process rolls out, you edit something, you're on your own. So what that is planned in the really near future, like next month, is to specify script tasks and listeners. So the thing you can do in the BPM designer right now will be available within this tool. So this is more technical, but it can be done. I think we should round up. Thanks for your attention, and if you got questions, come over and ask away.